And then I think we can begin. So welcome, everybody. My name is Stephen Fetter, and as I say every time, I manage the United in Learning program for the General Counsel Office, and it is a privilege and a delight to be able to welcome you from every corner of Canada into this webinar, into all the webinars that we offer. It's always remarkable to me how many different programs we have and how many different people want to come and be a part of these different things. So I will be here in the background as usual. We're going to invite you to keep your mics off, if you please, and to use the chat as your tool for connecting with us. I will watch the chat and collate the questions as they come in, because they often come in more quickly than any one person can read if they're also trying to talk. So that's my role in the process, and every so often I'll pop on and say, wait, stop, there's a few questions here, and I'll do my best to kind of pull the questions out of the chat and lift them up. If I miss yours, my apologies. I've got a couple of lenses on here. The first lens really is that I want to make sure that whatever questions I use in this time have a national import. So if your question looks like it's focused very much on a very specific situation, we might invite you just to take it offline and send an email to Eric or Clyde or Angelica directly. And so that's one of the lenses I'm looking at. I'm also trying to collate the questions so that if I get 5 asking approximately the same thing, I may just name one person, but I hope I'll hit all 5. And if I screw up and miss you, put it on again, and I might see it the second time. I should say, though, the chat moves fast. And if you've got the brain cells to read it, please do. But if it's distracting, please sit back and listen to the presenters. They're the ones who have the real goods here. And just use the chat as a way to talk to us. And then I'll watch the chat and pose the questions, and you'll hear what's important from Eric and from Clyde and from Angelica. So that's my role in the process, and I'm going to get out of the way and turn things over to Eric.
Okay, thanks, Stephen, as always. Good evening, folks across the country. We call this particular session what we've learned, but there's always new material as well. So we've got a fair bit of news today, as well as recapping key elements that we think every treasurer should have made. Every treasurer who's been around for the last 15 months anyway, during the pandemic, should have made some progress on, and frankly, you probably have. So I'm going to take a moment, as we always do, for the land acknowledgement. And those of us, the team broadcasting from Southern Ontario, we're broadcasting from Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Haudenosaunee people that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And I would just say that this recognition must clearly and overtly be connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. If you're a regular, you'll know that I believe the creed is a call to action for all of us, and that the work we do on the administration side, while perhaps fulfilling in itself, is really about freeing us to be church and to celebrate God's presence. So tonight, before I turn it over to our first speaker, though, or you know what, I'm going to unshare for a second. And Clyde reminded me of this earlier today, and we do have a special occasion tonight to recognize this, and many of you may be part of this. You may be co-celebrants here, but we just want to take a moment to celebrate for Stephen, Clyde, and myself our 20th webiversary. So just to say that we've been doing this 20 times. If this works, I have just shot off some poppers. I'm hoping that the streamers do not short out my computer laptop or my
And this is
computer
my
here.
only third one. Yay for you guys.
Yes, there you go. So anyway, now we'll get on to the regular business, and that voice you heard is our first speaker tonight. We do have, let me just make sure this is working. There, again, sorry, folks. So first of all, thanks to Stephen and Clyde for putting up with me. And if any of you have 100% attendance, then you can feel free to send a note and we will celebrate you with a popper next time. So
Undoubtedly the longest series of webinars I've ever hosted.
there we go. So anyway, what we're planning to cover tonight, we've got a fair bit of news on the team pay game plan, and I would describe it as listening to you and frankly, getting ADP to listen to us. We've got some news on the United Church loan program, a fair bit of information on insurance, and then we're going to just cover some stuff that regulars will have already seen in terms of the kinds of tools that should be in your toolkit by now. And then on behalf of Susan Jackson, it's my job to nag you a little bit if you haven't gotten your statistics in. So questions throughout. And with that, let's throw it over to Angelica.
Hello, everyone. Our favorite subject of the night. And we're going to be talking about, I'm going to give you an update on the rollout. And we're going to talk about a couple of new developments, which I think are fantastic. As Eric noted, we've been nagging ADP, and ADP has heard what we've been wanting. So we're going to talk about the run as is and a little bit about the bridge and the role it's going to play out for the next few months in terms of resources and tools. So again, phase one, it's complete. 1,600 pastoral charges have now, sorry. Oh, I heard a din, sorry about that. So the Team Pay Live is complete, the first phase. If you have not received a user ID or a password from ADP, please send an email to canadasbsadp.com. So if we can have the next one. Okay, so in terms of the rollout that we began on April the 19th, we have now converted 100 pastoral charges who have gone through the process of activation. And that includes the live training that they have done. They have full access to Team Pay. The goal is to do 20 codes bi-weekly from ADP's strat plan. If you have not received the welcome activation email, please be patient. This is a process that is going to take probably until early September, perhaps, or early October. We don't know yet, depending. So we have 1,600 pastoral charges to activate, and I've been receiving emails asking me when are they on the list. So I ask, please be patient. As soon as you receive that welcome activation email from ADP, then that is your turn. Again, fantastic news. You've told us they run as is. They tested 55 codes. It was a success. And we had a couple of hiccups and challenges, but that was because there were unique circumstances with their payroll. So now all of the run as is are going to be included a part of the standard rollout strategy that ADP has. So they're not going to be held back. You are going to be receiving the training as per plan. Okay. So
Angelica, back up a minute, because that's a technical term. What is run as is and what difference does it make to my treasurer?
So again, the run as is are payrolls that have been set up, and there is minimal intervention by you going in. The only time you go in to change your payroll is if you have changes to make. Other than that, it runs on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis, however it was initially set up at the beginning of the year. So that's what they run as is. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there is going to be training for those who are going to be converted, and you're going to have to attend the first training session to understand what does that mean, run as is, and what is your role in the run as is. Clearly, because it's new, you're going to have to go in and check in the first month or the second month just to ensure that it's done and it has been completed. There may be hiccups, but like I said, out of the 55 that we've had, only 2, there was a couple of hiccups. So if you are being asked to attend a live webinar for your run as is, please attend. Please ensure that you check your payrolls on a monthly basis for the next maybe couple of months or whatever timelines your payroll is, just to ensure it has been done. And if it hasn't, please ensure that you call ADP support line on that date. So it's very important. Again, the run as is, it was a success. It will run as is, but for the first month, second month, we encourage you to check in on the date of your payroll reports when it's time for your input day, and check to see if it has been completed. If it has been completed, great, hooray. If it hasn't, then we ask you to immediately call AD support line at the 1-800 number. Again, another fantastic initiative by ADP. We've been asking for this. As you know, it has been a bit complicated to access the bridge. I tried the bridge and then it was a bit complicated that you had to register, then you had to go here and you had to click there. So we've made it a lot easier now. ADP is going to have a landing page for UCC pastoral charges. There's going to be an automated process of registration, which is a few clicks, which I'm going to go through, but this is what that's going to look like, the landing page for UCC, where they're going to ensure that all of the webinars, training sessions, guides, anything that is produced by ADP is going to be maintained. And again, of course, ADP, we're looking at security to avoid any risks of intellectual property by ADP. They're wanting to ensure that this is held at the bridge. And finally, we have our own landing page, because in the past, the bridge was very generic. It was for the general population, but now it's going to be catered specifically to UCC, and they're going to put someone, a person who is going to be charged of ensuring that the registration process goes smoothly. So just a few steps. Next slide, Eric. Very easy access. That's your homepage for TeamPay. You're going to look at an icon at the top that says the bridge. It's going to be very easy. You're going to click on that icon. Next page. Next, okay. So that once you click on that icon, it's going to take you to the bridge homepage. You're going to hit TeamPay, and then it's going to take you to the landing page where it says UCC membership only. You're going to click on that, and you're going to click on request membership, and you're going to be automatically registered. So it's very easy, 3 steps, and you're in. No need to change any IDs, no need to get another security code. On your homepage of TeamPay, you will be able to access the bridge and the UCC landing page, which is fantastic news. All of the information, even for year-end information, it's going to land here, and you're going to be able to access it. Next page. And again, ADP service team, if you have any issues, you can definitely call the client service center. If you need some assistance from our payroll service team, please don't hesitate to call us. Any comments, questions, or concerns that you may have, please don't hesitate to send an email to Pastoral Charge or myself. Be patient with my return on emails, as I get quite a few emails, so I'll try my best to do it within 24 or 48 hours. And that's it for me today.
Great. Thank you, Angelica.
So before you disappear, Angelica.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Just a few questions that have come in.
Okay.
So just remind us again, are there different how's the training happening? Somebody says, are there different scheduled times for these training webinars? I think you said there were going to be 20 a week. How does this work?
Yeah, so ADP, and I think we covered this in the past session, where ADP is going to send you an invite directly to your the treasurer contact and ask you to invite you to a live webinar where you're going to attend and attend this webinar, and they're going to go over sort of the broader high level of team pay. Then you're going to be contacted by an ADP specialist, implementation specialist, where you're also going to be having a one-to-one training. So that's sort of the theme of the training. So far is going great. People are attending. And all of those training sessions are going to be posted on the bridge. So you have ability to access it at any time.
Terrific.
If you miss it.
Thank you. Somebody's really excited about the Run As Is program and doesn't sound like they're on it right now. Can you switch back and forth? Can you have yourself switch to Run As Is easily?
You can't switch back and forth.
Okay.
Once you've decided to run as is, then obviously when there is a changes, you're going to have to go in, but we encourage you not to switch back and forth. I think you either do it or you don't do it.
Thank you. And how do employees get their payroll statements, their pay stubs every month? Do they have to log in? Do we log in and then hand it to them? How does that work?
So whoever is in charge of doing the payroll, who has access to to the team pay, they have the ability to provide access to employees to get their pay statement. So and it's an automated process where once the employee has an access code, they go in and they get it. And if they lose their code, it's an automatic process through ADP systems.
Perfect.
If I could jump in on that for 1 minute.
Sure.
Just from experience.
Go ahead,
When you go to sign somebody up for that portal in ADP, make sure they use a personalized email address rather than a church email address. And this is especially so for the clergy, because in my case, our minister used his church address and now he's changing churches. And that creates a problem. So if he had his own personal email address, which I initially asked him for, then he would have not had to worry about it.
Right.
That makes sense.
Good point.
It's Eric. Just to clarify, Run As Is. So if I'm on Run As Is, but then suddenly in September, my minister does 3 weddings, and I want to run that through payroll. Am I back on Run As Is in October, or do I need to undo or do when I go in to intervene?
No, you're back on Run As Is. If you go in to intervene, it's obviously because you have some changes, and then it becomes Run As Is. But clearly, you're going to have a phone call with ADP to let them know that there are some changes happening on this month. These are the changes. Following these changes, we go back as Run As Is.
So maybe some of these specific questions we would raise with our individual trainer when we get the next level access. And then they can walk through it and show us exactly where the buttons are. Because there's a couple of people saying where I couldn't find it, where was it on the website? That's really what the individual training is about, right? They'll walk us through it.
Yes, and then they'll walk you through. Absolutely. And all of these as Run As Is questions, they'll be able to also answer those questions for you.
And they are fabulous trainers.
They're absolutely fabulous.
So one more question, and again, it's unpacking a technical term. What is the bridge?
It's a portal that ADP has that maintains all of their documentation, resources, training, webinars for the general public, for all of their clients. So now they have created a landing page specifically for UCC.
Great. Okay, well, listen, questions can keep coming in, but in the spirit of moving things along, I will say thank you to Angelica and just jump in for a bit. And news on so we're going to just cover sort of news items and changes and stuff. The church emergency loan program which frankly, we thought, we created back in the day when there was only the 10% wage subsidy. Hasn't been deployed yet to the extent we thought it would, but just to say it's still there. The original interest-free period was going to be to the end of September of this year. We've extended it to December 31st officially. I'm announcing it here. We'll have it on the web. But in addition, there's a good chance we'll extend it further. I think it's going to make some sense. We're all watching. We all thought, COVID would be over long before now. So we may well align it with CEBA, the government loan program, which has the interest-free period goes all the way to 2022, December 2022. For new loans right now, though, available at least all this year and interest-free at least for the year as well. If we can also consider amount increases, but again, you'll recall this would entail region approval, but the forgivable portion, if you pay off the loan before interest begins, would remain at $500. So those are some changes that might appeal to folks, if we're still facing cash flow constraints as we come out of the pandemic. On the insurance side, just recapping a few things. I've got some big announcement tonight. There's rate increases. Literally, I say virtually all. I can really say all. The sector generally in commercial insurance is just getting hammered with rate increases. We thought the magnitude of rate increase we saw last year would perhaps be all that was required, but that hasn't been the case. So just to say that whether you're with the sponsored United Church program through Hub as broker, whether you're with Marsh as a broker from the old days, whether you have your own church arrangements locally, the odds are your premium has gone up over the last couple of years by 30, 40, 50% or more. I've seen premiums more than double. The insurance underwriting is tightened up too. So, many of you have been asked for an application. My own congregation hadn't filled out an insurance application in years. It just kept renewing. When COVID ends, there'll probably be more inspections. And one of the services our insurer offers now is thermal inspections, which are intended to help identify potential, especially wiring problems in older buildings. Hub is using, with every application, is using a valuation tool to kind of check to see if, just ballpark terms, the replacement value based on type of building and so on. So anyway, it is what it is. I've never in my life imagined that I would be telling people that I negotiated for months to limit the increase to the kinds of increases that we're seeing. Listing here, this is from a previous webinar, but if a building is 35 years old or older, we're getting asked questions we never were asked before, like what plans do you have to upgrade heating, electrical, plumbing? There could be requests for appraisals, and we're trying to line up as many different appraisal company options as possible for you. We're also looking, and this is, I recall meeting with John Morton, one of our treasurers here, years ago on the subject of what we might be able to do around insurance. This is what we're doing right now. In the United Church Hub program, which has the most participants, I think there's something like 1,200, we self-insure. So we actually, at the General Counsel office, take the risk of what happens with claims. And in some years that's a positive, and some years that's a negative. That helps keep your premiums down by what we estimate something like 7%. Our broker has also reduced their commission instead of benefiting from these rate increases. So that's pretty neat. hear of, frankly, brokers doing that very often. But it may be an unpopular step because that flows down to your local broker too, if that's your case. So we are exploring more options and easier options if your circumstance might not require full replacement value. We're looking at more group discounts, broadening the participation, like if an entire region signed up. And we're taking another very hard look at possibly even self-insuring the whole thing, which is to say, we still have premiums, but in the extreme, if you created sort of your own insurance company internally, you wouldn't have the profit, you wouldn't have the commissions, so you literally could have a significant potential saving. However, it is a complex undertaking, and we certainly have a lot of other complex things going on right now. But just to say, this is a boat we're all in together, facing some pretty challenging financial pressures. So here's a piece of new news. I've been exploring cyber insurance for congregations for 7 or 8 years, and it's there's all kinds of reasons that it was difficult to get. But we finally locked in a program so that in the same way that congregations have directors and officers insurance paid for from the general counsel office, we have now just put in place a cyber insurance policy. There's nothing you need to do other than be a congregation in good standing. We'll be getting the actual policy coverage and so on online in the next little while. The key points that I would make here are there is a deductible of $2,500 if a congregation does have an event. But I've been with a number of organizations that have had cyber situations, and believe me, the costs are much higher. And the finance committee nationally was very supportive of this being the kind of cost to be funded from your assessments that every congregation could understand and support. I say here report immediately, but the main benefit of this new program is the education piece. So the insurer is going to do, offer us a variety of materials. They'll even do, some testing where they'll literally see if, how many of people might respond to a phishing message, and offer opportunities for risk management. So there's going to be an education component here that I think is really the best part of the package. They have comprehensive materials that'll be available online. We'll probably do a webinar with the cyber insurance company that's providing this. This isn't even something that you can get in Canada the way we've gotten it. We've literally gone to Lloyd's syndicates in the UK, who are, specialty insurer for this kind of stuff. But it's paid for nationally. It's available for all congregations. And as boring as insurance might be as a topic, it's something that I've been working on for a number of years, and I'm pleased to announce. So I'm going to stop there for any insurance questions.
So far we haven't had any come in, Eric. So you've been remarkably clear.
Well,
a little bit of conversation in the chat about training process, but I think people are training for team pay, but I think people are mostly answering their own questions. Well, what does cyber insurance cover? What kinds of risks are we protected from here? Well,
there's the biggest financial risks. I mean, there's the ones you hear about a lot are ransomware, right? Where you have to pay, somebody literally locks down your data and you have to pay a ransom. But the larger costs are potentially like taking the right steps and having legal protection and so on in the event of privacy breaches and theft of information. So that's where any of our organizations are most vulnerable. There's also a cyber crime element there that I didn't speak to it specifically, but if there is a theft, again, there's coverage related to that. But in very much in large measure, it relates to theft of information, privacy breaches. Those are the scare, and ransomware. Those are the biggest ones.
And when does the coverage start, Eric?
The coverage is in place right now already for congregations. You just didn't know. But you also need to know that if you had some kind of event, we'll be coming out with the reporting mechanisms. Right now, you should tell me, you should call the national office. We'll have a 1-800 number 24 hours a day, staffed by the insurance company. But we'll also want to be involved to make sure that you're safeguarded. And frankly, the biggest cost quite often, just like directors and officers, is the legal costs, legal and professional advice on what to do. All of this is provided by the policy.
And this covers every congregation, or just the ones who are protected by Hub?
No, this is in the same way that it's an umbrella policy for all United Church congregations of good standing.
And what about ministries that are not congregations? Somebody's asking.
Well, again, we have the issue that we often do with insurance, that these are separate entities with insurance is always based on an entity and anything that has a separate governing body. So if it's activity related, specifically under a congregation umbrella that you're reporting to the CRA, that's all covered. If you're an outreach ministry with separate incorporation, separate charitable or whatever, we have to explore different options for those folks.
Okay. And the last question about the cyber coverage, do you have a date at which it began, just in case people had an incident in the last week, in the last month?
I actually believe it was the paperwork that I signed was April 12th. I think May 1st is probably the effective date. But if somebody has something that happened in the last, I'd love to use it even as a test case. So please let me know if you did.
Perfect. Thank you. Just a couple of questions about directors and officers insurance. Where did we find the information on that?
It's on, if you Google United Church Directors and Officers or UCC Protect Directors and Officers, there's a full web page with the coverage, with the explanation of how it all works.
Mm-hmm. And if we're budgeting for an insurance increase, what does your crystal ball say the number should be? 20%, 15%?
The number that I've seen most often is 17%. But it depends what time you had last year. There was a 30% increase starting in June of last year.
And another 17% now? On top of that?
And 17 on top. And that's less than the other companies, the insurance church specialists that I've seen. There's nothing I can say.
We're in the wrong business.
Well, I tell you, this is given, I'm talking not just with the United Church. I'm talking to other denominations about this whole self-insurance idea.
So, Christine, just to be clear, we're talking 70% premiums higher than you paid last year.
17 and 30. So more, but half again would be not uncommon.
So probably your insurance went up 30% last year. It will probably go up another 17 this year. That's what Eric's saying.
Depending on who you're with.
Now, when is the information about the cyber risk stuff being rolled out? Is it available on the General Counsel website yet, or where will we find it?
Not yet. This is the first announcement, and I literally need to get the announcement materials up on the website. It'll be a page in the next week or so.
You don't work at 3 a.m, Eric? What's wrong with you?
I do. I get up. That's when I get up.
Those are all the questions on, directors and officers from the United Church doesn't cover abuse. Is that correct?
Well, that is correct, but only because abuse is not a directors and officers thing, unless there's a claim that the directors and officers knew about it and condoned it or something. The abuse coverage is part of the comprehensive general liability insurance. And I can't speak for every single congregation because it depends on your company. Some companies you have to apply for it separately. If you're with the United Church program with Hub or Marsh as a broker, I think it's included automatically, but you should check. And most local insurance companies or general insurance companies it'll be a separate application or separate rider.
So the D&O coverage is for congregations that are with Hub.
The D&O coverage is for everybody, but the D&O does not cover abuse.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think we should carry on, Eric. That's
very good. Very good. Well, it's time then for my fellow Webiversary guy, Clyde, to take over here for a time.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm going to talk about CEWS news. If you remember, this program was opened up and it was supposed to last 4 months, which meant around the end of June, but that was a year ago. We're now into June the 6th. Sorry, June 5th is the last of the periods, that's period 16, that have been actually approved by government. And so if you haven't got beyond period 10 yet, it's too late as of the 17th. You can still do 10 up till the 17th of June. But after that, try and keep it current. Now, the new budget that was presented a month or so ago did have in it provision for extending this program into early September. And we have not heard of it being passed yet. So we're looking at June the 5th as being the end of CEWS, unless it is passed. And then it'll continue. The amount of the subsidies started to decline in July and of last year, and they are going down. I've seen some significant decreases, but keep on top of it, keep up to date with your calculations, and file your claims. The very first point there says if you missed a filing deadline, there are limited exceptions. Those exceptions are limited to, did the CRA do something to prevent you from being able to file? And if they did, then they'll accept it. If it was you that missed it, there's no exception. And I have yet to hear of any exceptions being accepted because they were all controlled by the user, by our community, basically. So keep on top of it and keep applying those subsidies, even though, as I experienced with one, it got down to $19 was all the subsidy we could get for the period. But it bounced up again the next month. So they come in. The federal budget announced extensions to CEWS and CERS. And as I say, we're hoping they'll go through. The CEWS is September 25th. Whether it gets through to November, we're not sure. It may happen. It's going to be a separate deal beyond the budget, I would expect. In the CEBA loan, the deadline remains June 30th, another month, that's it. And I don't see that one being extended again because it was not well taken up. And so the interest in it, in using it, has been very limited. But just because I can't see it being extended doesn't mean it might not happen.
Yeah. So folks, if there's an election, that means that the Q stuff didn't get extended. If there isn't an election, it probably did get extended.
That's about the rate it's going to be.
Yeah. Go ahead, Clyde.
Okay, the CERS is open to owners and renters. We have had a couple of our churches get in on this. It's the same calculations as you use for CEWS. That is as far as the revenue is concerned, and your revenue drop is what's important on that one.
Hey, Clyde, back up. It's alphabet soup again. What is the CERS for those of us who haven't got one?
I was afraid you'd ask that.
Is that the rent subsidy?
That's a rent subsidy,
Thank you.
but it is open to property owners as well. And so as a property owner, if you have sufficient expenses in there in the type that's listed here, and you've had your revenue drop, you could claim something on it. There's some very tight controls on this one as to who can and can't. And there's not many of our churches that have qualified that I'm aware of. So if you try it and it works, great, go for it. Back to the CEWS, the attestation form. There's one thing that I want to point out in it, and that's box, where are we here in the list? Box 7, I think it is, in the list down, that tells you that, or tells them that you've actually chosen to use the January, February of 2020 as your comparison month, instead of going into the 2019 comparison. At the end of the first 4 periods, we were able to change what we did there. And so they started a second box, box 8, and that applies for periods 5 to 9, but actually right now it applies from 5 right through to 16. So I hope in your more current attestation forms that you've been checking box 8 instead of box 7. Mm-hmm. Other than that, they stay pretty similar to what we've been talking about over the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm. And Clyde, folks should have one of these, like a printout or something for each of their claims, like each separate one?
That's my understanding, yes, that each claim that has been filed, there should be one of these completed. I know there's lots of us, and I say us because I have not done it, where they're not signed current to when the claim was made, but we will have them and catch up on them. And if you don't do anything with it unless you're asked in an audit type reply from the CRA.
Yeah, so something to tidy up, folks. If you haven't already, I'm suggesting the same for anyone who's participated in the program.
Yeah.
Next.
Okay, the CRA Helpdesk, and thank you, Rose. She is on this tonight, and she has done a wonderful job. Mm-hmm. Churches have different payroll numbers, and business numbers need careful handling. If you're one of those churches that's in that situation, this is the time you should be trying to clean it up. And the sooner it gets cleaned up, the better it'll be for you as we go forward, because more and more is going to happen online, and you need to make sure that you're using the right numbers when you do it. The biggest problem with this is where churches have multiple point charge, or in places where there's been amalgamations. And so it's important to check it out and make sure. The T1235, don't put the end dates unless someone retires. It is funny, this came up about 4:30 this afternoon. They were trying to get on to the CRA's website through the charity setup that's now relatively new, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, and they couldn't do it. And I suspect it had something to the effect that they had no officers and directors since the end of 2019. So let's make sure that that's correct in your filings for the 2020 T3010. This form goes with it, and there's no end dates unless the person has actually resigned from your as an officer or director of the church.
So Clyde, what do you do if you don't know the start date?
Doesn't matter. I would leave that one blank. That has not affected anything, leaving it blank. It's the effect is that they take people off or they review that form when somebody calls in, and they won't talk to you if you're not on there current. The CEBA having some issues with your bank, they still happen. As I said earlier, that program is all but done. But if you've got time, you want to do it, try it and act quickly, because you've got until June 30th to get your application in. And for some, it has been a whole lot of problem. Having CRA access is not optional, because everything that the CRA is doing now is online. And they probably are going to keep pushing more and more to the online position. And it's so much quicker, so much easier if you've got the recommendation, or got the acknowledgement there that you have access to it. So it's worth doing that. And just in a bookkeeping way of reminders here, the reconciliations, or sorry, the subsidies that you've received should be in a separate account in your bookkeeping, so that you can reconcile it fairly easy going into the T3010 form, because they need to be reported under the federal grants that you've received on line 4540. Staying with the T3010, line 4510, gifts from other charities. And surprisingly enough, a lot of us have been collecting or getting money through Canada Helps for a number of years, or through United Way, a few through private foundations, and yet we've never put them in as gifts from other charities. Every one of these organizations is a charity, and so we get money from them, we need to report it as such. Gifts from other charities is a good measure that we need on our revenues. It does help if we know who the donor was, because we can still go out and thank them. But in a lot of cases, you're going to find out the donor is anonymous. And you can't do much about that, but at least be aware of it. And definitely do not issue tax receipts for it. That would throw your numbers way out of whack with it. Line 4540, we've already talked about. And if you've been fortunate enough to receive any grants from the provincial government, that would be line 4550. I'm not aware of any program where you might have got something from the municipal government, which would be line 4560. But if you have, make sure that you deal with it properly there. I know in my own case, I did get a $5,000 grant from Markham at one point for the heritage building upkeep. And so that's why it had to be reported, or where it had to be reported was on 4560. So it is something to be aware of. Moving ahead to the next slide. The only thing I'm going to repeat here is, if you are getting a new authorization to come on as represent a client, the person who is signing the form for you has to put on their phone number. And the CRA is now very diligent about following every one of those up and making a phone call to that person. So remind them when they sign the paper that they may get a call from the CRA. It would only be to verify their information so that the CRA knows that they're dealing with the right person to give the authorization to represent a client. I've had it happen in the last month with two different places where I was getting authorization. And in one, the person, the youth, we couldn't count on answering his phone. And I finally convinced him to watch who's calling, and if it's CRA, make sure you take the call. And it did get through eventually, but that's just a thing that's happening now because of the trouble in cybersecurity that they're implementing. This is the new online authorization to the CRA, to your to the My Business account for charities. And I would suggest that when you get these slides, you take this link that's there in the red, copy it into your browser, and get a look at the form. It's a 2-page form, and it is very helpful. And when you do it, it's going to ask you about your charity. And every one of us should be checking off the other box because we are constituted. We are not a corporation or a trust. We are other. So I think that's all I'm going to mention there. You've got access to this document, and it's worth having it even if you don't use it right away.
Yeah, and Clyde, here we are, this is preaching to the choir. I would bet 90+% of our folks here already done this, often with the help from yourself or from Rose. So
Right.
Thank you.
But I've already printed the form off because I wanted a copy so that I can take it to places where I go and show it to others and what they can do. So adding people to My Business account, worth every penny of the time that you spend getting it there, because it'll save you the trouble later when 1 or 2 people off the list are no longer with your church and you've got to find out how to put somebody new on. It should be 3 people, the way I look at it, on there. If you get 2, that's fine, but it's better than 1. But 3 gives you a little more depth for people coming and going in a church. And signing up for Represent a Client, remember who it was that authorized you going on, and get them to authorize the other 2 going so that it works even better. Electronic access. Every pastoral charge should be on with the CRA now, as we've just mentioned, with ADP and with Service Canada. Now, Service Canada is not as important because it's for ROEs if you've got your employees all on ADP. Because the new program, you can trigger an ROE when you terminate a staff member, whether you lay them off or let them go completely. You trigger the ROE on the new team pay program. So that one is not important unless you have payroll people who are not on ADP. And to me, it's not worth it. Everybody should be on ADP. It's a lot easier in the long run to manage the whole payroll. Again, 3 people with separate email accounts and passwords, because it's the accounts and passwords that usually get forgotten along the way. So having different ones, and somebody could even have them all written down in one place together so that they're there for emergency sake, but each person needs their own login. Every employee should be on ADP, and the beauty of that is that when you get onto the full, beyond the second stage of this team pay, is you can sign them up for having their own portal, and they get their pay slips and their T4 forms themselves. You don't have to worry about them anymore. No handing them out to people. It's not necessary. And the other place to maintain your electronic access is to the church hub. Very good to have. You as treasurer have it. You have an administrator in the church that has access to everything that's there. And then other people have access to only the parts that they need. And within the part for the treasurer, you'll have access to the statistics form and to your assessment. And this is one of the advantages of having your statistics form done, because the assessment will show right there as soon as the formulas have been approved and everything's there. It comes out fairly quick, and it saves worrying about it come budget time. You know where it is. Carrying on with electronic payments, receiving them. Canada Helps, donation button on your website. It's well worth it. You can have register with them. It helps to reduce your fee, but it also gives you a report that tells you who has been donating through Canada Helps with names and addresses. Receiving e-payments or Interact transfers. I find this very interesting. We've been doing this now since the 15th of March. I opened up e-payment, Interact transfers from congregants very quickly. And every Sunday morning, when we get to the point in our worship service where we're talking about donations, the prayer of gratitude for it, and I have one of our people online send me an e-transfer. I get it while we're doing it. So one Sunday morning when I had the opportunity, I said, see this? I'm collecting the offering right now. And I processed it through while we were on service. So it's an interesting thing just to show people that it does happen and it does work well. You can receive funds with Interact Transfer, but making your payments to vendors is not easy with a two signature account. If you have a business account, you can do it, but they're a lot more expensive than what most of the accounts we have. If you put pressure on your bank, they may be able to find a way of doing it. I know there's a slide coming that's going to talk about what I was able to do with TD, but just keep after it. One of the things that we may have to look at doing is to get our board to approve a single signature account, a separate one if we want, where we move money into it so that we can pay certain bills. Or we use a pre-authorization, which I think is the start into the next slide if we could. Pre-authorization for utilities and to the national church. We can pre-authorize. We've had our assessment on par for a couple of years now. Works very well every month. I know exactly how much to process. I am seriously looking at our M&S figure because we are fairly consistent on a regular basis. But if we vary between, and I'm just going to use some numbers here, if you vary between 1,100, between 1,000 and 200 or 1,200, I would set it up for $1,000. And down towards the end of the year, you can always make an additional payment. And it just works well on par. The loans that are set up that you've got with the church, they can all be done through par as well. And again, it makes it very clean for us to work that way. Again, this link that's here, the next one, with payment options, I took the time to print that off this afternoon, so I know the link's working. I copied it into my browser and found the form, and it's a 2-page form again with some good instructions on how to get payments from the local church to the national office, and it's worth looking at and trying to do. Online banking, if you can, it saves a lot. Whether you realize it or not, and I know you're not being paid, so salaries really don't count in on it for us, but your time does. The average check today is worth $27 to issue. By the time you look at everything involved in it, from buying the check, processing it, stamp, the envelope, everything. Time is important, so time needs to be in the calculation. And $27 does not include what the amount of the check is written for. So think about that. Find ways around it. It's worth it. Dual signature accounts are a problem. So I went to TD Bank a number of years ago now. I've been on it for, I suspect, about 8 or 9 years. And found out that after I spoke to the small business specialist, moved it up to the assistant manager, got to the accountant, got it up to the manager, and he phoned down to the downtown office. They found that there is a set of forms that can be filled out, but everybody who's a signing authority has to be there at the same time. Well, I put pressure on them on that one, and I ended up going out and getting all the signatures and brought them into them with copies of driver's licenses mainly, so that they had something to show that I had an actual person, not just filling it up. It depends on
Clyde, we know that there are other treasurers just as tenacious as you out there.
Yes.
Sorry, it has to be as tenacious as this, but I think of Edna Cook chasing her receive a loan and various other stories that we've gathered over the last year.
Yep.
We'll keep working to try to make this simpler. At the institution level, we're talking to the banks too, saying, come on, folks, you've got to make this easier for what are, we describe this as small business.
Yeah, they're setting it up for electronic processing, and they want electronic processing, but they're not making it easy for us.
That's it.
So we have to work with them. Covered a lot of material, folks, but where's your questions?
Yeah, I got loads of them here, Clyde. So let me kind of cycle through them in terms of the topics you addressed. And some of those will be from 3 hours ago. So I hope people remember what I'm talking about. You started by talking about the government subsidy programs, the CEWS and the CERS. Somebody says, I presume that if our previous treasurer did not apply for any of these, we're now out of luck. There is a cutoff date, but you probably still are available for some of them. What's the cutoff date? Do you remember?
The cutoff date is June 17th for period 10. So
Okay.
they could apply in the next couple of weeks for period 10, and then they can carry on from there.
Right. So you're out of luck for periods 1 to 9, but you could still get the one for period
Absolutely.
10, which was what we're into 16 now. So that would have been January, I guess, would be period 10.
Well, period 10 covered from November 22nd to December 19th.
There you go. So better than a kick in the pants.
Yeah.
A few questions about the T1235, which I think is the form with the directors and officers that we
That's right.
talked to. I'm just trying to, rather than just quote the numbers, I want to say what it is so that everybody knows we're all on the same page, right? So that's the form that you would submit with your T3010 charity return every year, saying, these are my directors and officers and all of the information about my charity. Somebody's saying, if I do it online, is it possible to simply update the previous years? I had to retype all 30 directors and officers again this year.
Yeah, there is no way of updating it. They do not retain the information online. It is unfortunate. I've already put in a request to try and have that one adjusted. Knowing a couple of people there, it helps to get some information in there, but it doesn't guarantee getting it done.
And similarly on that same form, if you're putting somebody in and then they change positions, do you put them in and then put the end date and then put them in again with a new start date?
I would not do that. I would just change the position title on the form going forward.
Great, thank you. That's all I've got on that form. The next form you talked about was the charity return, the financial one, the T3010 it's called.
Yes.
A few questions about that. Where do we report gifts that we receive through the United Church Foundation? Is that a gift through a charity?
Yes, it would be.
Okay. What about the, somebody seems to have received a loan from the Toronto United Church Council, a forgivable loan. Is that also a gift from it through a charity, or how was that reported?
That's a good one.
Well,
I would.
Go ahead, Clyde. I'll just jump in and say if it's still a loan, it's a loan.
Yeah.
Unless or until it's forgivable, and it becomes a grant at the time that the lender and the borrower agree that it's forgiven.
Yeah, it's not revenue at this point. It's a loan.
Okay. And when
So
it
it does not hit the income statement at all.
So when it turns into a grant, then where does it get reported?
Then it would get reported from another registered charity.
Thank you. the person who wrote that note was putting it in the line that refers to federal government funding, and it's not, certainly not that. So Toronto United Church Council is a registered charity. That makes sense to me. Thank you. You talked about ROEs, which are records of employment that are issued when a employee leaves our employ. And somebody's asking, does ADP still charge extra for doing ROEs when they issue them through team pay and we just trigger that? Is there a fee for that service?
I'm going to defer to Angelica for that response because I'm not sure.
If it's through team pay, no, it does not. There is no fee.
Thank you.
If you are requesting calling ADP, please process one, then there is a fee.
Yeah, and I would think that has to be to be without a fee. It has to be run at requested on the payroll where they're getting the last pay.
That's right.
If you requested a payroll later, then there could be an extra fee for it.
Sure. A couple of people are acknowledging that on the T3010 they've got a ton of people listed. So she thinks that each year it adds people unless we put a termination date. So maybe if people are coming off, we need to list them as coming off so that the thing doesn't get to be a mile long.
That's exactly what is needed. You have to take them off. You're supposed to list everybody who was effective in January of 2020. We're talking the most recent one, or came on during 2020. And if they left during 2020, they're the only ones that get an end date.
Thank you. So make sure at the end of 2020, there are still people who don't have end dates, or else you're in trouble.
That's right.
Few questions about Church Hub. There was a problem earlier in the year of printing our statistics reports. Has that been resolved? And anybody know?
It's Eric. I'll speak to Church Hub in the next segment. And yes, I think if you've completed your submission, we can print now. There was a workaround that was created.
Perfect. Thank you. There's a couple of other questions. A couple of treasurers still don't have their access to Church Hub, presumably because we didn't have an up-to-date email address for them, or the invitation went to junk in your own email program. How would a treasurer get access now, Eric? Are you going to cover that?
I'm going to cover it, but an email to myself or Susan Jackson, sjackson@united-church.ca. Susan's looking after the treasurer enrollment.
Perfect. Thank you. And Christine is asking if we've got a mile-long list of directors at the CRA, how do we clean it up? Do we call the charities directorate, or do we just list them with a termination date so they don't show up next year? What's the easiest way to fix that if we have to update it?
I did not think that the list continued from one year to the next. When you file a T1235, it supersedes what they've had.
Okay, that doesn't seem to be Christine's experience, but that's okay. She says hers does continue, so maybe just filing those names with a termination date would be sufficient.
That could be done.
Yeah, thank you. That's all the questions I got, folks, so I think we can carry on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clyde, thank you, and happy Webiversary.
Same to you, Eric. And
There we
Stephen.
are. So talking about statistics, I just mentioned you folks gave me a nice segue there in terms of Susan Jackson needs your statistics as soon as possible. There's even places in the country who thought that maybe we didn't need statistics this year because of COVID and being closed and so on. But we don't ask for the statistics just to have some numbers to publish. It's more important than ever because it directly impacts your assessment. Just to say, we're moving to such an electronic world that it's even more essential for us, for you folks, to update and have current the email information on Church Hub, because that's going to be the source. We're taking out all the risk of typos. We're taking out the risk of some department not getting it the folks you needed. And so here, of course, I'm also saying that just a reminder about mission and service, that it's still why we do everything else here. So even though we're talking about all these government compliance forms and everything else, we're hoping that we can slowly chip away and automate some of this stuff so that more and more of our time and resources are focused on the mission of the church and funding that work. So again, from a statistics point of view, income that you report to on the T3010, we need to know about it. It reconciles to your overall financials, but it isn't part of assessment. We had this attendance question a lot, but you almost need to make it up. A lot of folks have more people participating online than they had in seats. There are parts of the country that were open for a time during the measurement period, but let's face it, all our stats are going to have asterisks for 2020. So again, I can't stress this enough. There's still, and it's probably not the folks on this webinar, okay, but we're still waiting to hear from about a quarter or so of our congregations with their statistics. Please get them in the next few weeks, if at all possible. There's a huge reason to get them in. Your assessment next year will probably be higher if you don't. Not because I'm trying to be punitive, but literally just because of the various trends in the country and so on. Assessment is designed to go up and down with revenue, and in most cases, we're looking at revenue dips, as we discussed last time. So please get those numbers, those statistics in. Susan has flagged here a couple of reminders for you. We talked last time about how we're going to simplify investment accounting, but for now, your total gain in your investment account, that's you adjust for transfers in or out, but your market gain or loss, your total market gain, needs to be reported in A4F. And to the extent that there is just unrealized gains, that needs to be reported in A4G. Frankly, this is a pain for many of us, many of you, and that's one of the reasons we're revising the formulas to simplify this considerably. CEWS loan reporting, the grant portion goes on A4I, and the loan portion goes on A6. And again, Susan and I and others will be working to streamline the statistics gathering process. We expect it to be much simpler for 2022 going forward. So if just a few words on assessment. We talked about this last month at length, but just a reminder that folks who are already at the target level of assessment will probably pay less in 2022 than they did in 2021 because it tracks to revenue. And there could be a bounce back up in 2023 depending on what happens with your revenues. But that's the whole idea of the new financial model, was that it did link directly to the health of congregations. For those who chose a freeze option or who are looking at bigger increases, again, the increases will be smaller, and in some cases, some regions that 2 years ago thought they were looking at a scary increase might not be looking at one at all now when we fully implement the financial model. As we covered last time, we are extending the transition period because of all the COVID impacts from 2022 to 2023. So if your pastoral charge was looking at an increase based on the statistics you submit, it will be spread over 2022 and 2023. And frankly, more than half of congregations will be looking at decreases, not increases anyway. So as we talked about, this is the value proposition, a slide from last time, but it's also sort of my dream of working with whether it's region treasurers, whether it's congregation treasurers, or the team of folks that we have helping out from the national office. You know, we have to be constantly working to improve things, you know, and thinking, I hope that we're getting and providing value to each other, both ways. We learn stuff every time we have a webinar from you folks, some ideas in the chat, information sharing, and hopefully every now and then we deliver a nugget for you folks as well. We've mentioned this a few times. Again, for this audience, I'm going to assume most of you are signed up unless you're new or there's been a glitch, and in which case, if you're a treasurer, Susan Jackson, or if you wear both hats, if you're both have the treasurer hat and you're the main contact to the church admin, you'll have a combined role and you'll see more items. But we had hoped to have everybody enrolled in the first quarter, and most of you did that. And we didn't really have a lot of challenges with passwords and things. Again, this group, it strikes me as early adopters and folks who bought into all the electronic tools. This view here isn't one that is available to you as a treasurer or even as a church admin, but the idea is depending on what your user profile is in a database, you'll have access to different things. One of the functions that we've just finished, I think, or maybe finishing adding to Church Hub is support for search committees. We had a somewhat goofy arrangement in the short term where we needed to share that over that admin ID. We've now created one to enhance the confidentiality of the process, of the Church Hub process. So search committees will have their own user and functionality. And we'll chip away at this as we figure out how to try to, automate the admin things that might be easier if they were automated. So sort of a last spot for questions. We have the usual slides with our contact information, our help desks. You've seen, most of you have seen all these before. Angelica, Clyde, and I have, this will be on the slides online, our email addresses and so on. We do apologize in advance. The response times, especially right after webinars, we tend to see a little bubble of email. But thank you for what you're doing. And as we take any questions, I will stop sharing here.
Okay.
And I guess the other thing I might consider doing is throwing up some more of this.
Glad you're having fun. So I don't have a lot of questions, Eric, but I have one or two.
Shoot.
And skipping back to slide 36, which was the one about the statistics, where you were talking about line A4F and A4G.
Yeah.
You've got unrealized gains and losses in both lines. Is that correct, James is asking? Or should the unrealized ones only be reported on G and just the realized ones on A4F?
No, the total gains is the first one.
Okay.
Including unrealized. So basically, if you didn't put any new money in or any new money out, it would just be whatever happened to your investment balance.
Right. So that's the slide we're talking about, just so that everybody else remembers it.
Oh, perfect. Yes.
So
Yeah.
James, what he's saying is unrealized absolutely belongs in A4F. It also belongs in A4G.
Yeah.
So
See, an
A4G is a subset of A4F. They're not two separate places.
And frankly, this is something I wish I'd thought of 3 or 4 years ago. I want to give credit to some people like Andy Spears, who's a treasurer out there, and various other treasurers that we worked at. We could have simplified this right from implementation, but
The question James is saying, James is adding here that each receipt item should be reported in only one category from A1 to A6. So that's why he's wondering why we're putting it in both categories.
No, that's a fair question, and I think probably a typo as we've tried to refine our process. But the overall gain is intended to capture the growth in the growth or loss in the fund, And the unrealized gain is a piece that we wouldn't normally track. So that's why it's requested there.
Okay, thank you. And just one other question. We haven't received our financial statements from the auditors yet. Can we still submit our statistics?
Absolutely. The auditor, you always need to do what you need to do. The auditor, even for submitting your statements to the CRA, they don't have to be audited. They do have to be signed by a treasurer. But for your statistics, I would encourage you to always do that as soon as possible.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions here. Am I missing something, folks? Put them in the box now. If I have missed them, my apologies.
Hey, I'm already celebrating.
Your beer hasn't arrived, Eric. We need to keep talking.
That's because my partner's doing a separate broadcast webinar in the next room, and hers hasn't ended yet.
Ah, there we go.
One of the things I want to comment on as we wind down, we've commented how Eric and Stephen and I have done 20 webinars, but I'm seeing a lot of people on the chat that have been here for all 20 webinars.
Mm-hmm.
Or close. Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, that's really encouraging from our side of things. We knew that there was a lot of duplication where people were here for more than one, but we didn't stop to think about how many were actually here for all of them. And that I hope that you found they were very worthwhile. And I think by your attendance, you've shown that. So
Either
really appreciate it. Thank you.
Either that or they're gluttons for punishment, but we do have a community here for sure.
For sure.
Sure. So a couple of questions have come in. The free directors and officers of insurance, does it apply to our foundation? Somebody's asking. How would they know?
Frankly, it shouldn't apply to a foundation. There are relatively few foundations across the country, there's about 20. If your foundation was one that was listed, so send me an email, but basically a foundation has a separate board, and if it has a mandate beyond what trustees would normally do with investments, for example, it should have its own separate D&O insurance. About 10 years ago, I fought with the insurance company to have a bunch of foundations covered because I said the foundations were identical to church trustees. I was stretching the truth a little bit, but the short answer is write me and I'll let you know. Some are, some aren't. Any foundation with a broader mandate should have its own insurance.
Thank you. So somebody's asking a question about this slide. Does this mean that there's two different kinds of cyber insurance, Eric? And if so, how do we distinguish between them? What I think she's asking about this, and are they the same or different? Can you?
Well, it's probably the cyber, the first button and the third button, but for your purpose, it doesn't matter. Like if you've got a cyber event, we'll worry about that later.
Okay.
Cyber crime is a thing in insurance language, just like theft or whatever. Whereas the other kinds of risks, even ransomware, I don't think is a crime. I think it's an exposure. So it's all in the insurance lingo. You don't care if you have a problem. We've got some coverage that we think might protect you against the biggest costs that arise in this situation.
Thank you. So a couple of questions, and they're for me, which is really odd. I don't think I've had questions on this webinar for me.
You were showing off with all those acronyms, though.
No, the question was, how are these webinars publicized? And somebody doesn't know about them. So it's really hard to get the word out about these things, but there's a couple of tools that we're using. There's an e-newsletter called Essentials, which goes out every 2 weeks to every pastoral charge. And somebody in your pastoral charge will be receiving it. And these webinars are advertised in every one of those. These webinars are also advertised in the e-newsletter that comes out from United in Learning, which comes out every 2 weeks as well, typically every other Monday. And so our hope is that if we spread the net like that, that you'll receive it and you'll pass on the word. So if you're here from a church and you think somebody isn't getting it and they need to, invite them to sign up for either the United in Learning newsletter or the Essentials newsletter, or both, and then they'll be notified. Occasionally, we have sent notices out also to every treasurer on our list, but we aren't doing that typically every time, because we don't want to fill the same person's email inbox with 3 different copies of the same announcement. So if you want to subscribe to the United in Learning newsletter, go to unitedinlearning.com and click the button that says sign up for the newsletter. It's that simple. We're not planning another one of these in June. We're not planning another one of these right now until maybe the fall, unless something happens. And, we didn't plan to start this whole series in the first place. But if there are changes in government things, if the budget is passed, if it isn't passed, if something changes, if there's a new variant that the vaccines don't cover and the pandemic resurges, I mean, you can pull out your crystal ball. I don't know, but if something drastic changes, we will advertise this in both of those newsletters. We'll let you know as well as we can, and you can always find the recordings at United in Learning as well.
Yeah, and Stephen, I think it probably I think we could just go ahead and say there's a bunch of stuff happening in the fall, including a recall of general counsel. So I think we could probably commit to there being webinars in September, October, and November. And if it's okay with you, the fourth Wednesday, whatever our normal sequencing or timing, be good.
Okay, we'll make it a date. We can all write it on our calendars now for the fourth Wednesday night in September. In the meantime, we wish you a wonderful summer. We hope that you can get some relaxation. I was a little shocked last night to be on a webinar where several ministers were saying they hadn't taken any vacation last summer because of the pandemic, and now they're exhausted. And you know what? We all need vacation. The treasurers need vacation, and so do the clergy. So be sure you find some R&R. We've pivoted to the biggest emergency in our lifetimes. We've got another pivot coming, I think, as we go back into our buildings and find out that this is not going backwards. It's going into a new normal that will look different from what we left behind. There is work for us all. In September, we're going to need to be rested and relaxed and creative as we make this new pivot in September. So blessings to you for a rejuvenating summer. Blessings to you for the next level of creativity. And we'll look forward to connecting with you again in September.
And thank you, Clyde and Stephen and Angelica.
And thank you, Eric, for spearheading this. It's been really great.
Yeah, it sure makes a big difference. I'm going to take Eric and Clyde into a private room where we can debrief, and we'll say goodbye to you and look forward to seeing you in September. Bye for now.
Bye.